The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Atlas Chiropractic Center of Escanaba, Michigan, Largent Media, or any of their affiliates or subsidiaries. The material and information presented in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Should you need medical attention or advice, seek out a licensed medical professional or facility in your area. The tapping into uncomfortable with Reade Hubert DC name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service.
Welcome to Tapping Into Uncomfortable, the podcast that answers the age-old question. I wonder what happened to that kid who ate all the paste in grade school. The Riff. By the way, it's not actually a riff, which makes it even funnier that this podcast exploits something like that isn't even right. So you are amazing, fantastic, and wonderful. This is the spot where we put the statistics so that you can remember this. That's one of the problems we're having right now. People don't know how special they are anymore. You're amazing. Check this out. Cells of the gut and intestines usually last no longer than 5 days. The intestines have the highest turnover rate in the human body. Unlike neurons in the brain and spinal cord that usually are not replaced after damage. Just think about how amazing it would actually be if the neurons in the brain and spinal cord could be replaced after damage. By the way, that's what they're working on. So what do we got on the hydroponically grown menu today? Number 1, the microbiome. Number 2, it has begun. We're going to answer the question and answer, where does health come from? From the inside or from the outside? And the new Q&A. This will be our tip of the cap to punk music. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I like that.
It's time for another exciting episode of Sick Bay.
Duncan Robin 7543. Duncan Robin 7543.
He just walked in.
Put Roger into sick bay number 2.
Yes, doctor.
Oh, what's wrong with me?
That's what I'm going to figure out. Nurse Peggy, I need a shot of B12. Ah, thank you. I needed that.
What about me? Are you a doctor?
I'm not a real doctor, but I have a PhD from TIUU. I got a question for you. What did you have for supper last night?
I had 2 eggs, bacon, and pancakes.
I see. And for breakfast?
I had pot roast.
I see. Nurse, get me my horoscope. Yeah, I will have positive energy today and come into some money. Nurse, write these lucky numbers down. Stat.
Yes, doctor.
Am I going to make it?
Your intake form says you work out and take supplements. Is that correct?
Yes.
Roger, you have a severe case of cicada dysrhythmia. You're thrown off since the time change. You're taking probiotics before your prebiotics. You're taking your post-workout drink before your pre-workout drink. You're putting acute cream on a chronic condition and chronic cream on an acute condition. You're eating breakfast for supper and supper for breakfast. And you came in through the outdoor.
Am I going to live, Doc?
Yes. Take this prescription and pay your bill in cash, and you should be fine.
What is it?
I don't know, but it is a great commercial. We have OF in our H2O. We have OF in our H2O. We have OF in our H2O. We have OF in our H2O.
I love that commercial.
All right, welcome to the microbiome, where we are going to do it different because there's stuff that we need to discuss that nobody is discussing. So what is this thing called a biome? Well, think about this. Think of any forest near you or around you and think all the animals, the flora and the fauna, and how they all got along for generations. And then check this out. Then you throw a bad species in there. So one of the most vicious species in the island of Australia is a rabbit. So you can see what happens in the microbiome, which is microscopic life learning to live together. They always say that the depths of the ocean, we don't know anything about it, and that's going to be the next great conquering thing to know. I'm here to tell you right now, there's two places in the human body that are deeper than the oceans. It's the human brain, which gives rise to your mind. We don't know much about it. It's going to be very difficult. But also the second thing is a microbiome. The microbiome is so unique. It is more unique than DNA. Now, that's a philosophical term. That is something that does not apply in the real world, because essentially, here's what you have, folks. You have 100 trillion microbes living in your intestine. 100 trillion. Now, that's just the medium number. You could have 50 to 120 trillion. In other words, they don't know. They're just guessing. How do you count 100 trillion? Bacteria, fungus, viruses, and parasites or protozoa. We're going to talk about that today. So let's get into this so it can make some sense to you. Your small intestine is roughly 22 feet long. If I were to take your small intestine and I were to take an ironing board, now remember how we talked about gyrification of the brain and how it actually turns upon itself? That's why your intestines look the way they do, so that you can cram just 22 feet of the small intestine, and your large intestine is roughly 5 feet. So you're roughly around 30 feet of intestine. In that is packed 100 trillion microbes. But here's what they don't tell you, is they're not necessarily friendly to each other. They keep each other in check naturally. You have 100 trillion of these. How are you actually going to study the human microbiome, what these microbes do in vivo, which means in life? How do you do that? You can't at this time. You can't tell the genus and bacteria species and how they're all working together. You can see it in your rectosigmoid contents tech. But if we were to take the small intestine, going back to that, and I were to take an ironing board and I took that small intestine, 22 feet of it, and an ironing board, and I stretched it out. It's called the surface area. And that's how your body absorbs things into your body, your nutrition or some toxic chemicals. That surface area, as I roll it out with a rolling pin, of your small intestine only, would be the size of a tennis court. That's how much absorption opportunity that your body has. And so those cells, in front of those cells lives 100 trillion microbes. What's fascinating about the human microbiome is, from your mouth to the rectum, damn near killed them, to your anus, what happens there is that is one big, large, open tube to the environment. Did you ever think about that? That is open. So what your body did, and how amazing it actually is, the body puts 100 billion microbes in the way, so these microbes within hours can adapt to the environment. That's one of the major reasons they're there. The second reason they're there is to give you life-giving and life-saving nutrition. It actually starts the moment you go through the birth canal. That's why natural birth tends to be a little bit healthier for the baby versus C-section. And that's the reason why. Because as a baby comes out, it starts to build its microbiome from the bacteria and the microbes within the mother. So healthy mother, healthy baby. This goes until you're about the age of 3. The stuff you get into starts to build up these community of trillions of bacteria. This microbiome is built coming through the birth canal and all the things you got into, but they've actually found in postmortem studies that they actually found yeast in the intestines of babies, and they don't know how it got there. Also, meconium is actually the rectosigmoid contents of the child. You don't want that in the amniotic fluid, and they're actually finding some bacteria that are in the meconium. But remember, you're supposed to be zero, get started in life to build these microbes. There's a lot more studies that need to be done, because if that is the case, that this bacteria and this fungi or this yeast is actually getting into the child or the baby, that is being passed from the mother. It's absolutely fascinating. And I think we're going to have to change where the actual microbiome starts. So I'm a little concerned. That's the reason we're giving this talk, because of the fact that the term biome is being thrown around. Here's actually what we know about the microbiome. Now, when we go to market to you as a healthcare provider, this is what we tell you about the microbiome. Because you essentially have 1.8 trillion immune cells. We had talked about that previously. So you have 1.8 trillion of those. You have 100 trillion microbes. My friends, why aren't you dead? You have trillions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. Why aren't we dead? Explain that to me. Here's the reason why. Because we're supposed to work with them, not against them. And that our inner resistance of our body is greater than the odor resistance, or what comes in, so that these things can adapt and make nutrition for you. Here is what these things are asking of you. They are asking for room and board within your intestines. Your job is to give them a good place to live. Your job is to give them good quality nutrition so that they can break it down so that your cells can absorb it. But these things also help make things that give rise to vitamins. They also give rise to enzymes. They also give rise to things that make you alive. And if you don't have them, you're dead. So it's absolutely fantastic. We need to start appreciating the microbiome. Not when we get a little glimpse of what it can do. What we want it to do is work well for us all the time. But all we ever talk about with the human body is the problems with it. See where I'm coming from with this? And when we learn a little bit, now we want to start giving you a lot. So here's what's happening. We now have prebiotics. Prebiotics mainly is fiber. What we want as a healthcare provider for you to get is your fiber as well as your nutrition from primal or whole foods, so that your body can get to nutrition, chew on the fiber for a little bit versus just adding fiber to it. We're so deficient in vegetables and fruits in our diet that this is where our fiber naturally comes from. It's one of the greatest, best things that we know of so far for our microbiome. But we're giving it now in prebiotics in our environment without all the good stuff attached to it. And then we get into probiotics. Now, probiotics is the actual billions of bacteria that we take in a pill form, goes in. And now we're getting into postbiotics marketing. Postbiotics would be the stuff that's being made for us. We can now take in pill form. So we have pre, pro, and postbiotics. And you need to be careful. Here's the reason why. The microbiome, my friends, is all about this. It is all about creative destruction. What you want is good, healthy colonies of bacteria that produce chemistry good for you. When that gets thrown off, it produces poor or less chemistry that affects your life. It's that simple. If we start putting things in because we think we need more, and your body already has this colony set and it's doing okay, and now you're taking bacteria that you think are good for it, what is it going to be? It's going to be an invader. Then your body's got to fight it off. So when you talk to your doctor and you start taking probiotics and you start to feel better, that's working for you. You have to be careful because we can do everything over the counter and take bacteria that we think we need, but our body actually views it as an enemy, because that's the reason it stays in its colonies. It doesn't grow consistently. It stays in its colonies that benefit you, and it changes. And it changes through adaptation. It changes with age, and it changes with your diet. So when we're pounding ultra-processed food, it's definitely affecting our microbiome, which is affecting our nutrition, which is going to affect our life. So your microbiome gets set roughly by 3, and it is one of the greatest things that you can have for the longevity of your body. Let's just take what happens when a bad bacteria gets out of control. When a bad bacteria like Klebsiella, and I'm not going to bring up the species, I'm going to bring up the genus. It's a lot easier that way. When Klebsiella can get up into 30%, where it actually grows where it shouldn't consistently, what ends up happening, it will actually make alcohol from the simple sugars that you get from your diet. It will actually produce alcohol and make you stumbling drunk. There are cases of that. All good bacteria that we like to label as good gets in places where it doesn't belong, will become a problem, and that will inflame our immune system. So remember that. All good bacteria where it doesn't belong can cause a problem. Here's another thing. When you go to get a shot in the arm, what do they usually put on your skin to kill things off and sterilize it? They put on a type of alcohol. Then they jab you so they're not injecting that bacteria into your bloodstream. Alcohol is toxic to the microbiome, but we sure don't think about it, do we? And last but not least, antibiotics, which means anti-life. Now, there's nothing wrong with antibiotics. It has saved billions of people, and they're needed. But when you destroy your microbiome from prolonged use, which most of the time is not your fault, and it keeps you alive, good luck building it back up. You can try to, but it's very difficult to actually make those changes. They're constantly fighting, and they're creating their colonies, and they're hoping to stay there as long as they can. Just like the lowly rabbit becoming Australia's #1 invasive species, foreign bacteria, fungi, viruses, and parasites can cause severe microbiome issues if they can't live in harmony with the rest. There is a movement within healthcare that's starting to concern me, and what they want to do is they want you to buy certain specific things that is natural, that will kill off only the bad bacteria. Now think about that. You take this natural supplementation, it will only kill off the bad bacteria, and then when those bad bacteria are dead, we're going to replace it with good bacteria. There's no scientific studies on that, but that's what's starting to happen, and we have to be careful. Because how do you know it's just killing the bad stuff and not killing the good stuff? So you have to be careful. And what they're finding is as we're changing, compared to our ancestors, we've actually lost a genus and species of bacteria, as they've studied in scatology, from our ancestors from hundreds of years ago. That changes too. We've lost some of that within our human lineage, and we're not passing that on because we don't use it anymore, because we don't need it, because our environment is much easier than it used to be. What does this all come down to? What you got to do is respect what you got and work with it. Not against it. Work with it. And watch all the marketing that's actually happening. And last but not least, some people are so diseased of the intestine and also other issues that they're actually performing fecal transplants. Yep, you heard that right. What we're actually doing is taking rectosigmoid contents from healthier individuals, and we're putting that into other people, into their biome to hopefully give them a much better microbiome. And some people are living. Some have passed because they're viewed as foreign invaders. But fecal transplantation is a real thing. It has begun. What has begun? This is going to be my last talk for a while on PFAS. I'm tired of it. I'm actually bored with it. And when this becomes boring, I am done. So no more for a while. So why are we talking about this again? Because what has finally begun is the feds have finally put limits in drinking water. And when they put limits on drinking water, we're going to see how much of this is actually in our water. So the feds have started to test it because they now put limits on it. This is the results that are coming in, and only half of the testing has been done. So here's the statistics so far, that 158 million Americans, that's half of us, has PFAS in our water. 99% of us, they believe, has PFAS in our body, and that includes newborns. But what they've done is they've only tested 29 of these particular chemicals. There's over 9,000 PFAS chemicals. Of this testing, all 50 states have it. So it's going to be fascinating to see what is actually going to happen when we get a picture of the other half of the testing that's coming in. Out east on the East Coast, they started in contaminated zones. They're checking the sap in trees. Well, you know, sap leads to syrup, and we're going to get an idea. The results are not in yet on how much these trees are getting it. Oh, and by the way, folks, we had talked about cancers are increasing in 20 and 30-year-olds in the colon or in the intestinal cancers, and it's really quite scary what's going on. So if you think about the 4 T's, thoughts, toxins, trauma, and traits, it's going to fall in 2 categories. It's going to be in the toxins, which we have been discussing immensely, but also the epigenetics, the actual expression of the cancer. So if you look at the #1 organ that replaces itself the most every 3 to 5 days in general are your intestines. They change their cells every 3 to 5 days. So if you have something toxic coming in, what actually changes your epigenetics, can you understand now why these kids living in a toxic environment can be getting cancers quicker? Now, they don't know yet. There isn't quite a cause, but it's going to be in one of those 2 categories or those 2 categories alone. What can you finally do for yourself? Some of the small things that you can do for yourself is actually charcoal filtered water inside your home that you run your water through. It can help. We're going to see if these numbers change or if they stop it altogether, because this is also a hot political topic. There are states right now that are trying to rein this in, and the lobbying has begun to keep it the way it is. So they're going to start out with a particular bill, and by the time it's done, we will see how much of an effect it actually has on our health. So the answer from the last Q&A, where does health come from? From the inside or from the outside? I covered this in earlier podcasts, but I want you to know something. It always comes from the inside. So I'm going to give you my own definition of health simply because I can. Here is my one-sentence definition of health. Health is a fluctuating state of inner resistance to inevitable death. What happens during those fluctuations internally will determine your health expression. The new Q&A is this. What does this mean to you? I am, period. I am, period. What does that mean to you? It's a major step to just be. So as always, I want you to be happy, I want you to be healthy, and I want you to just be. This whole podcast is based on a book. Be on the lookout for 4 T's to a Better You, a blueprint for identifying and addressing the 4 causes of sickness. You'll be able to buy it just about everywhere.